This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dula from Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee to talk about the penultimate episode in Season 1 of The Bad Batch, the 15th episode, Return to Camino. We have one returning guest and one new guest to Coffee with Kenobi. First, we'll bring in our returning guest, Tom Gross.
Well, hello, everybody. It's great to be back for another episode of The Bad Batch. Got episode 15, penultimate. I like that. That's a great word.
Second to last. Yes.
So we are almost there.
So close. And we did get the news this last week that there was going to be a season 2 of Star Wars: The Bad Batch, which is great news. Speaking of great news, it is my pleasure to bring into the show. I've been on the Disney Marvels podcast several times, but this is the first time for Matthew Gracon to be on Coffee with Kenobi. Matthew, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure and an honor. Thank you, Dan. Thank you. And the news, being on here is almost as great, if not better, than finding out there's a season 2.
Oh, well, you are too kind. You're I see that my check arrived safely at your home. I'm glad to hear that.
Absolutely.
Very good.
Right next to my cup of Star Wars coffee.
Perfect. Well, no, we're very glad to have you on, man. Your show's great. We'll certainly talk about that at the end of the show. But today we're going to talk about Return to Camino. It's the end of the last episode. Matthew, we saw that Hunter was kidnapped or captured by Crosshair. So naturally, we start this episode. They're going through hyperspace, and we see Hunter and Crosshair. Talk about their conversation at the beginning of the episode. Were you worried, by the way, for Hunter at the end of the last episode, or did this kind of play out the way you expected? Wait, you know what? Before you answer that, I
was going to ask.
I forgot to get your letter grades and overall reactions to the episode. So Matthew, we'll just throw it back to you. Letter grade for the episode and overall reactions to this episode.
I guess I threw you off with the coffee. I apologize.
No, it's not you. I blame the host.
He's a good guy. He's a friend of mine. I'm gonna have to give it a conditional A+.
A conditional A+. Why conditional?
Because it a lot of it I think is going to hinge on how part 2 plays out. I think they've built up so much wonderful story from these past 2 episodes, and unfortunately I have seen it on other shows where the final episode sometimes just doesn't carry through necessarily as well. I don't think this is going to be the case. I think this is going to move it from an A+. If there was something higher, like 120%, get that extra credit in there, then I think that's my foreseeable outcome.
Very good. But overall, you really like the episode.
Right, overall, and I know they're calling this part 1. I think this is part 2 of 3 parts, because I want to say the previous episode was all mixed into this.
Very good. All right. Awesome. Tom, what about you? Your letter grade and overall reactions?
Oh, for this episode, A+. I absolutely love this episode. Crosshair and Hunter. Now let's say Special Lab. Bad Batch reunited, I put. Certain points of view. And, the end of part 1. That's not the end, but the ending of... Yeah, okay. So, the end. A+.
All right. Very good. I'm going to give this one an A+ as well. It's a very strong episode, perhaps the most mature one of the entire season. And the lighting, the music, the emotional peaks and valleys that this thing brought, and some of the things that the two of you have already said. So let's just break it down. I slipped up earlier. I guess my inhibitor chip wasn't fully removed from me, perhaps. But Matthew, I was asking you about Hunter and Crosshair and their brief union at the beginning of this. At the end of the last episode, many people feared for Hunter. But as we see here, there's just kind of a bit of cat and mouse going on. What'd you make of their conversation at the beginning of the episode?
It sucked me into the episode, and I find like the way that Crosshair, I apologize, Crosshair is so cold and calculated through this entire episode. It really it plays out well, and you really don't know where is he going. and he just has everything down to a science. I mean, I know that's kind of a little foreshadowing, but even just at this beginning part, in his general demeanor, he knew exactly, if I do this, your friends are going to do that. You are bait. I have this whole thing planned out, and it was that very cold, villainous. If he had a lightsaber, he'd be a Sith Lord, but he wasn't even. He's like that without even having a lightsaber.
True, very true. Tom, anything you want to add about their conversation?
I'm just gonna what you had said, Matthew, about the foreshadowing and the how he knows Clone Force 99. He's a part of Clone Force 99, and he uses this against them time and time and time again in this episode. So I love the foreshadowing. Yeah, it drew me in for sure. I wanted to see, this was part of my intro when I say Crosshair and Hunter, but there's many moments of them. So this one it drew me in, but then in a second viewing, I was like, oh geez, he did this to them over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of using Hunter's comm to lure them into a trap.
Yep.
The Bad Batch they aren't foolish, but they're probably aware that this is a possibility, but they're very loyal to their friends, which is certainly a very powerful theme in this episode. Omega and the rest of the crew are working on their ship. Omega, Tom, shows a side of us that we haven't seen very, very often. She's pretty far from patient, isn't she?
Oh, she is pacing and driving Echo kind of crazy while he's trying to, they're repairing the Marauder. I mean, it got beat up in that last battle, and she just can't contain herself. In fact, she says, I can't do it. And I love how episodes and episodes, weeks and weeks of viewing this, the relationship between Echo and Omega come together here, and he's the absent father here, and continues to impress upon her that it's the patience, and rather than try to talk her down from it, he just says, give me the next tool, and he gets her active in that. I love the way this scene of repairing the Marauder ends, though, with Tech getting the call from the communicator, the comm, the comm, and how it ends with Omega saying, "Where is he?" and then cut. That was magnificent.
That was good. And was anybody else hoping that Echo was going to ask for a Harrison wrench?
No, man,
that's good.
Just the spanner. I'm like, no, ask for the
that's
wrench.
right. The hydro spanner. Her yell is great. So they go to Camino. We figured out really, really quickly. Of course, it's the title of the episode. But Matthew, we got this awesome return to the music from Attack of the Clones, which we haven't really heard. Since Attack of the Clones came out in 2002, as far as when it originally aired, that beautiful piece of music. I'm not sure what it's called, but with the lighting and that music, it's kind of a haunting return to Camino, which makes sense because that's how I'm sure the members of the Bad Batch feel too.
The one thing that has been consistent throughout this show has been this outstanding score that's been accompanying everything, and it's just played out so well. I don't, and you guys could correct me if I'm wrong, I don't remember another example of a Star Wars animated series using the music so profoundly. I know in the other ones, the music did back up and worked in it, but this, I think even compared to even a number of the movies, the music has just been so fantastic and so well placed and edited in.
Mm-hmm.
Like Crosshair's score, for lack of better name. Whenever he's scheming and he's plotting, and you got that just electronic drilling sound behind him. But yeah, as they're flying in, and this sets the tone, and you see the three. Are they even Star Destroyers at that point? No, they're the clone ships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Vendors, I think he called them.
Yeah,
are just hanging above the planet there, just very ominous, just hanging there, and they just fly in right past them.
It's pretty cool. I mean, we've had, of course, Star Wars cues throughout the history of Star Wars animation, but this is much more explicit and much more longer ones. I mean, last week we had the A New Hope stuff from the Death Star and things like that. But what we find out, Tom, is that first of all, the Stormtroopers question the clones' motives. I mean, now in retrospect, it seems like that's a bit of a sort of a tell of what's going to happen. But when you're watching originally, it just feels like an organic part of the storytelling. But they plant a seed there. But then we learn that Nala Se has had something in the works for a long time. Talk about the arrival and the discovery of the secret landing platform and tube system.
Yeah. I thought that was really cool. The one that I do want to go real quick, back to the Star Destroyers or the clone, the Ventners. Sure. Did anyone find it odd, or maybe a foreshadowing piece, or maybe I'm just looking too far into it, that they were facing the planet? You know, in a normal blockade, they'd be facing outward to intercept ships, and the Marauder makes it right in. Like, they just slip right past them. And I just thought it was interesting that they were facing, that, you know, they were aimed at the planet, which I guess could be foreshadowing of what's to come. But also maybe there was strategy there to let's give them the impression that we're, you know, our presence is made. And in fact, isn't it Echo that says, "Why are there only 3? Where's the rest of the fleet?" Yes. I don't know. I just found that to be curious the first time I watched it, and then the second time I was like, "Oh, they're facing the planet."
That's a good catch.
Yeah,
I didn't notice that.
So
I noticed that as well, and also, like you said, that the Marauder was able to get by so easily. You have 3 ships that were relatively close to them, and strangely enough, they didn't notice the one shuttle.
Yeah, interesting. So yes, I thought this was so cool that Nala Se anticipated that there might be some sort of instance that they find themselves in, where they would need a secret escape. They would need that back door to get in or to get out. I would assume that she was thinking to get out, but here Omega is aware of it, and I love that moment where Tech he says, "Omega, there's nothing here." She says, "Fly lower." He comes down. She goes, "Fly lower." And he stands up and says, "If I go any lower, I'm going to be in the water." And then that's when Echo says, "There's something in the scanner coming up from the ocean." And here comes this platform that's, you know, activated by you know, hovering low right above the water line. And just fascinating. And I have to say, I know that this was a conversation we had recently on the pour over, and not to bring that into this, but those little transport balls that they were in to go to the city, that was just like, that reminded me so much of the little transport thing that takes you up into the St. Louis Arch, by the way. So a little plug for CWK pour over.
Interesting.
That we recently talked about. But anyway, yeah. And how did you know about this? You know, from Nala Se. And when they come in, you know, text notes that the trans system is undocumented. Omega knows this, and it heads right into Nala Se's lab.
Yeah, and then we find that they go all over the planet, but
it wasn't like a handful of people that know it.
Sorry, what?
I think didn't she see, like, there was a special lab? It wasn't just like any
right.
lab.
No, it's hers.
Yeah,
which we'll get to that a little bit later, because they haven't revealed that just yet.
Yeah. Can I bring up one thing about the transport?
Sure.
Yeah.
Being a kid also of the 80s, I had very much Voltron flashbacks.
Oh, that's a good catch. Maybe it could have influenced the design.
Heading in the tubes, heading off to the Lions.
Interesting. Well, Matthew, I'll throw this question to you. So the tube system and the things that Nala Se has done, we get a really quick sense that we've got a situation where Nala Se and Omega have a serious bond, and we already knew that based on our reaction to the death of Nala Se, which makes it a little more tragic. But Omega has this incredible way. She's very emotionally mature. We talked about this on Facebook Live this week. She's got this emotional maturity about her, the way she handles and embraces her emotions, but they don't govern or decide her actions. But she certainly has a moment of vulnerability, and it's sort of reflected physically by this great animation with the wet hair too.
Yeah. Again, paying attention to the details in this animation. Like you've said before, that Lucas animation it keeps stepping up their game, and it's very evident in this. And the way that she's presenting and talking, are we going into what she said?
Sure, yeah, please.
How she started talking about what happened in that lab. That was the lab that she was created in. So personal connection to her, into Namaste, it was more than just a lab. It was where she was born. But then she takes it one step further and talks about how that's where Clone Force 99 was created. And she was there watching them be created. And the maturity. She wasn't this little girl. This was a very mature person talking. And there's such a gravity to what she was saying that even caught the clones off guard.
Right.
Definitely. And I know we talked back in June, Dan. I don't know if you remember that we were talking online about how old is she versus the clones, and we now just found out she's older than them.
Yeah, but she is like Boba Fett. She's unaltered, so she is aging normally.
Right.
Yep. Exactly. Interesting. Well, speaking of clones and the other clones, there's a pretty key conversation that happened, in which we get a couple of examples, Tom, throughout this episode of learning more about Crosshair than I thought was possible. I thought he was a pretty cardboard character, honestly. A cool character with some interesting abilities as a sharpshooter. But when that inhibitor chip kicked in, he seemed to be completely irredeemable and sort of hard to spend time with because of how he treats people.
Yeah.
And, the murder thing is certainly not a very good thing. No. But then there's a conversation they have where they say, looks, the Empire is phasing out clones. Hunter's trying to persuade him, trying to plead with him, to beg him to just sort of change his mind. And he says, no, they're not phasing out the ones that matter. And the Hunter says, no, sorry. Crosshair says they don't leave their kind behind most of the time. And Hunter picks up on that. You get a bit of vulnerability, and Hunter says, you tried to kill us. We didn't have a chance. And then Crosshair says something that I had to rewind 2 or 3 times to really catch the context of. But he says, but I did. Tom, talk about that powerful conversation.
I noted that because I felt like that was conflicting with what I mean. When he says it, I just assumed, did he have a choice because of the inhibitor chip,
right?
And so at that moment, I thought that line made sense, and it was sort of like a heartbeat moment where I was like, oh, so they both did what they had to do. They're soldiers. Mm-hmm. And that's what it took me back to and reminded me of. And in that conversation that you just read through, there was a moment with, we've talked about in past episodes about this, I don't want to call it a theme song. It's more of that like low, deep, almost like a hit of a fuzzy low guitar beat. That happens in this when Crosshair pokes his blaster into Hunter's chest, when they say not the ones that matter, poked him, and you get that heavy beat. And so why I think that's important is because, as you said, Dan, that Hunter's trying to make an appeal here. And there's times that Hunter is so convincing that I think a quote normal, not inhibitor chipped Crosshair might actually be persuaded by Hunter because A, he was his leader, B, he's being very persuasive, but when he pokes him with that, everything goes away when that beat comes back with that music piece. But what I said at the very beginning when you asked the question is when Crosshair says, and I did, with what's revealed later in this episode, it's very conflicting, and I don't know what to make of his point there. I want to know why didn't he have a choice? Because of the reveal later,
Right.
we learn that he potentially, because there is some vagueness to the reveal later, but he did have choice. So I don't know what to make of that line after watching the episode.
See, I this is how I interpreted it. And the first time I thought it was possible, then the second time I feel like there's sort of no doubt about it, at least in my interpretation of it. He's saying, but I did. To me, he's saying, look, I had the chip. It affected what I did. I feel horrible and guilty about it. I didn't have a choice. And I'm going to come back to that point later because it becomes much more punctuated later in the episode. But we start to learn truly, and we remember Omega holding Crosshair's hand in the pilot of the first episode, saying, I know it's not your fault. This isn't going to be your fault. And the way Crosshair looked at her back then, it kind of comes back here, but with more pain. Like I've seen Crosshair inflict a lot of pain. I've never seen him feel pain, and I thought that was really important. Then we get a moment of levity, Matthew, where AZ1 returns. It was great to see AZ. What did you think about the reunion and the implications of having AZ back?
I think it was a nice moment. It was a nice little uplifting moment in what was a very, again, heavy story. But he also was a nice device to explain what else has been going on that the Clone Force 99 hasn't seen or hasn't been able to know what's happening. Explaining that, well, other clones have been shipped off. Where? We don't know. Then the droids were being reassigned or dismantled. So it's that very manipulative way of the Empire that, if we don't have a use for you, you're gone.
Right, which is very frightening. Crosshair talks about his frustration with Hunter not seeing the bigger picture, and then Matthew, they have this plan where they're gonna go on this lift to go up into this area which we saw in the first episode, which is almost like a video game training platform, where originally in the first episode, they were showing Tarkin what they could do. Now Tech's idea is they're going to surprise Crosshair, Naturally, that doesn't happen. But then Omega wants to come with, but Matthew, he basically they have some ideas for Omega about what she's supposed to do.
Right. They just tell her, if things get wrong, we give you a signal. Get out of here. Go back to the ship. Get yourself, and flee. Which, going back to giving her permission now to just fly the ship, obviously to save her life. And she conscientiously disobeys them. And I like how she starts figuring things out. She was like, wait a second. She looks around, sees where she's at, and realizes she's got an army around her that she can use. And she starts fiddling with things to try and get the battle droids working again. It's a very interesting moment because again, you see that mind of Omega working faster and in different directions than the clone troopers can. And again, as we said earlier, Crosshair knew exactly what they were going to do. Even though they're just going to say, okay, we're going to surprise him, he knew what the surprise was before they did. And another instance of Tech really kind of being out of place. Like all of a sudden, you mentioned this last week, how he's starting to, his calculations of always getting things right, his calculations are misleading him. And you could just see it just isn't playing out well. And Wrecker kind of calls him out on that.
Of course, Wrecker, who we know is not a good liar, by the way, which is no surprise. So it's
never
basically
been one of your skill points.
So it's an actual trap. So Crosshair has them all red-handed, Tom, and there's this wonderful way that Lucasfilm Animation is telling this story, where basically everything is led up to this point. There's suspense, there's tension, there's fear about what's going to happen, and Crosshair is even more predictable than usual because he's showing some moments of vulnerability. But before there's actually shooting going on, what do you want to say about this portion of the show and the confrontation where they're all basically together for the first time?
Yeah, there's so much great
Yeah.
dialogue in all of this. And, we've had 2 or 3 instances in the last 10 minutes of show, maybe even more, like 7 minutes of show, where Hunter is appealing. And here we have everybody's standing there. And I have to say, I appreciated Wrecker's comment to Tech, of course, because Tech's my buddy, my guy. He's when they went up the lift, Wrecker goes, "Well, I guess you were wrong about that one." I thought that was a great moment.
That was great
because it's ugly. This is not going well. Because this goes back to one of our conversation points earlier in the show. Crosshair has outmaneuvered them on everything. Tech, we'll use the lift. They won't be expecting that. We'll get a slight advantage. No advantage. Crosshair knew that they would do that. Anyway, so here we are standing with Crosshair and Hunter still trying to one-up themselves in conversation and appeal. And Crosshair says, "You betrayed everything we stood for. For what?" And Hunter says, "We're loyal to each other, not some empire." And then Crosshair, little dagger in the side there. "You weren't loyal to me." And there were some great animation pieces there because Hunter has this like taken aback look of surprise, and you get a shift in the music at this point because there's some hopeful music in their conversation, but there's a definite shift, and then now you get Crosshair's line. This is his certain point of view that I referred to in the opening, and that was, he says, "I was one of you. And you may have forgotten, but I haven't, and that's why I'm going to give you what you never gave me." And then there's like this look.
And he says, "A chance."
A chance. And oh my gosh, there's looks from everyone. Looks from Clone Force 99. Looks from the TK troopers. Looks from, everybody gives a look there. And it's just such, oh my gosh. I didn't know what to make of it. I don't think we were keyed in yet to the little reflectors. I don't think we knew that when he said that, but that is when Tech looks to the side and sees the reflectors, and he nudges Wrecker and kind of gives him a clue. I don't know that Wrecker had any idea what he was nudging him for, but Tech caught on to what was going on.
There's a lot of great stuff here, and you mentioned something that is my favorite part of the entire episode. It's when he says, "If I wanted you dead, you would be, it would be justified because you betrayed everything that we stood for." Yeah. And so at this point, Hunter is thinking he's talking about the Republic, but Crosshair is not talking about the Republic. Crosshair is talking about Clone Force 99 and the brotherhood that they all have. I mean, that's what he says, for the Republic, and he says,
loyal to each other.
Loyalty, yeah, and he says, "You weren't loyal to me." When that happened, it was like a sucker punch of emotion, because that's when you realize Crosshair isn't being driven by the inhibitor chip. Crosshair doesn't understand what the Empire is doing because he's only privy to what they've shown him, right? Yeah. They've gone against the Empire, so that's why they've been chasing him down. Hopefully, he doesn't remember what happened when he had the inhibitor chip and those refugees were murdered. If he did, then we've got even more problems to talk about, which will certainly come up next week on the finale itself. But he feels betrayed and abandoned by them. He feels rejection. He feels hurt. He feels isolated and alone. Never in all the time that I've known Crosshair, and it hasn't been that long, but never did I think he would have those emotions. He went from being very cardboard, as I said at the surface of the show, to being really three-dimensional and really fleshed out. And the fact that even after being hurt, he wants to give them a chance, he cuts off those cuffs, it shows that he's not this bloodthirsty murderer that we thought. Matthew, we've covered a lot of ground in the last 5 minutes, but anything you'd like to add about this reveal about Crosshair's emotions?
Well, I want to take a quick step back, that he did send out one of the troopers.
Yes.
To go after Omega. And I bring this up because it's the same one that at the beginning was talking to the
Admiral Rampart. Yeah.
Admiral Rampart, and you don't know where her loyalty lies. And something I put on the closed captioning
Mm-hmm.
just to make sure I wasn't missing any bit of detail, because this segment that between Hunter, or pretty much Crosshair, and the rest of the Clone Force was so powerful. He's not a soldier following orders anymore. He has his own motive, which makes him even more dangerous. And we don't know exactly what's driving that. What he explains is quite outstanding enough. And we're still wondering, is this his own personal feelings? Is this aided by something else? But something I picked up in the descriptors was they're not TK troopers, they're ES troopers.
Yeah, on Facebook we talked about that one. Does that stand for elite squad?
Possibly, yeah. Because there's a slight difference between them and the TKs of the what's becoming of the stormtroopers.
Yeah,
and,
it's the armor that they use in the second episode of the season itself, I believe, that Crosshair was supposed to train.
Yeah, and they have the weird like ridging on their helmets that looks like you can insert special pieces. But she's the one that he sends out. Now, does he know about her? I was wondering, and that's why he sent her out of the room. But if that was the case, then you would think he'd want her there too.
Right. Yeah, but then maybe she's less likely to fire on his clone brothers. Interesting. True. All right. So I'll tell you what, let's take a quick break, and when we return, we'll break down the rest of this episode. And gosh, I don't know. So much to talk about, but there's a lot more conversation. We'll be with you right after the break. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
With travel beginning to open up and Walt Disney World and Disneyland reaching full capacity, this is the time to book your Disney World vacation with MEI and Mouse Fan Travel. Their signature service and expert advice will help clients maximize their vacation, time, and dollar. I use Becky Menken and MEI's incredible services all the time, both for family and for travel for the show, because of their no cost, no obligation quote when you use the service. Plus, they proactively adjust a booking if the rate goes down. Literally, I will wake up one morning and I will get an email from MEI saying that the price went down, and I will get a refund sent to my credit card right away. I don't have to do anything. They help your family enjoy everything Galaxy's Edge and the Disney theme parks and the cruise lines have to offer. Can help you plan every detail and always share invaluable tips. That's for Walt Disney World, Disneyland, the Disney Cruise Lines, or other cruise lines. It doesn't have to be Disney related. They literally can help you plan a vacation anywhere on the planet. Be sure to go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel and sign up for a free no obligation quote to any of the Disney theme parks on the planet or any vacation that you have in mind. You'll have the best vacation possible and help out me and Coffee with Kenobi in the process.
We are back, and Matthew alluded to the ES trooper that was sent out to find Omega. And what he doesn't say, let's capture her, let's just kill her, or whatever you would expect a mustache twitching villain to say. What he says is, get her on a shuttle and send her off world. She'll be safer. And Hunter says, whoa, she's one of us. And he said, no, stop pretending you're something that you aren't. Hunter, so Crosshair has no idea about the bond that Omega has shares with all of them because he hasn't been around. He thinks he's doing her a favor. This ties in, Tom, to what you talked about earlier, certain points of view. We're learning that there's more ways to look at this conflict than we originally thought. Crosshair is certainly bringing a lot of good questions up. But Crosshair also thinks the Empire's job is to protect the galaxy. Tom, why does Crosshair think that?
Well, I mean, I guess when I look at it, and this goes back to what you were saying just a little bit ago about how Crosshair feels isolated, feels lonely. Well, where does he have a place? Well, he certainly has a place with the Empire, and the Empire helps to make him feel safe and allows him to use his skills. And I think and when I think back to that comment that he says about stop pretending to be something that you're not. The point of view that I'm working with here is that I think Crosshair thinks that they are just kind of wanderers and troublemakers and maybe even, I don't know, there's no mention of the rebellion thus far specifically, but some type of a counter to the Empire. And so he's kind of like, stop it. You're harboring this girl that really kind of gets in your way. And again, here I noted right after he says that you're something that you're not, there was another change of music, and it takes a very darker tone, because this is where I'm like, and I'm not okay. So I feel like there's a lot of times Crosshair is making some really good points. But we know the Empire, I'm just looking at his comments from the point of view of trying to convince Hunter. But then you get that shift in the music, and he says, "We are superior." We've heard these words before. And he says, "The Empire can protect the galaxy with strength. It is what we were made for. We were brothers once." And I'm like, oh, his appeal just took a really sinister feel to it, that it's not about safety. The Empire's not about those things. The Empire is about thumb on you, putting your thumb down, and we're going to use our strength. We're going to use our special abilities for the purpose of this quote unquote safety, which we know from looking at Raxus, and we know from Duro, and we know from so many episodes that at some times we were calling them, or people were using those episodes as quote unquote filler. All of that has purpose now in his comments, because we had to see that the Empire, they're not saving anyone. They're not saving an economy. They're not giving people jobs. They're enslaving people. They're destroying. And that line right there paints the whole picture that we've been watching since episode 2.
That's right. That's right. Very well said, by the way. So he set up those trick shots, which was pretty fantastic, setting up those
Troopers
mirrors.
Stand Down.
Yeah, it was a callback to the 4th episode in the last season of the Clone Wars, which is how he takes care of all those battle droids. Pretty cool stuff. Don't make the same mistake twice. Don't become my enemy. And then Hunter says, "Crosshair, we never were." And that was like, that just kind of takes your breath away as well, because
Chilling.
yeah, it's very chilling, Matthew. They show that there's love, there's respect, there's admiration between the two. It's not, he's trying to kill me, he's dead to me. It's more like, basically it's Hunter saying, "Look, I forgave you from the moment it started. I know this wasn't your fault." And then, Matthew, not only was that beautiful, but then we get this moment where Crosshair, there's a firefight that breaks out. First, Hunter and Crosshair are like fist fighting, which still makes no sense to me after these heartwarming things where they're just actually fighting, but it doesn't last very long. Crosshair joins up, and then we get the theme to the Bad Batch, this massive crescendo of the orchestral score by Kevin Kiner, which is just simply gorgeous. And they're all fighting together for the first time since the first episode. And that was about as triumphant as we've seen in this season. Matthew, talk about the emotions of that moment.
It was, in some ways, that this is kind of where it felt like the battle was a little unnecessary, because you had so much necessary, just the story wise, and so much great depth going into these characters, that did we need this battle? But it does play out. I get why it's there, because you need that kind of action point, and it kind of, like you said, it's a crescendo of everything that we just dealt with. And now we got this battle going on. And I thought it was interesting that, you had all these droids coming at them that the Clone Force is fighting, but then Hunter and Crosshair are still fighting each other. And at some point, that stops. And they start fighting with not with each other, but helping each other, protecting each other against these oncoming droids. And it's a weird switch. And again, going back to like Crosshair's logic, can I just say that maybe in his mind, this is comfortable to him, how the Empire is treating him. He wants to be that soldier in doing his normal soldier duty. And that's what he knows, and that's what he likes doing. And they're giving that opportunity. So that to me, there's to Crosshair, that's some sort of comfort level.
Yeah.
And you can tell he loves the battle. He loves the fight. To him, that's all that matters.
And I think it's him doing it with his team.
Yeah.
Like there's like a joy, there's a connection. The way the five of them work together, it's like nothing else. I mean, we've seen them as powerful together as a team, but when there's five of them, I mean, you can't tell me, and I'm sure you both agree, that a number of the skirmishes they got into in season 1 would have been a heck of a lot easier with Crosshair up on as a sniper somewhere.
Oh, absolutely. And they called that out a few times, that, that would have been Crosshair's job. And well, he's not here. We have to figure it out now.
Yep. Exactly.
And poor Wrecker wouldn't have had to go up to those high locations.
That's right.
Wrecker, crawl across there. What?
Oh boy.
So the stormtroopers escape. They all run off the planet, and then we get to this moment where, this is the big moment. I mean, to me, this is the biggest moment is when he says, you weren't loyal to me, is the biggest emotional wallop. But then at the end of this, right before things start blowing up all over the place, Crosshair is surrounded.
Yeah.
And Hunter once again makes a plea about, hey, you know what? It's your chip. And Crosshair says something shocking to me. He says, the chip was removed a long time ago. And Hunter says, what? When? And he says, it's not important right now. And then I flash back to the Ryloth duology, where Crosshair was talking to Admiral Rampart when they were trying to frame Harrison Dula's father, Cham. And Crosshair had something on the side of his head then in that episode. And I said something to Mason about that, and I thought, I wonder if this is where he hit his head earlier when they almost captured them all on that planet where that Star Cruiser was, and everybody got their chips removed.
Yeah.
Or is this something else? Or maybe it's my imagination. I don't know. So maybe it was around that time. Visually, that's the only thing we have to go on. But the fact that he's still making these decisions, and then you look back, Tom, through this lens of the episode, and you realize he's put them in danger, but it's more like he's trying to get them together and get them back together. It's like he thinks he's doing the right thing by getting them with the Empire, or just getting them from just, as he says, you're meant for more than drifting through the galaxy. What did you think, Tom, when you found out that Crosshair's chip was removed?
Well, first of all, that like I had to shift my thinking, and my brain went back, and I was like, wait a minute, because I did the exact same questioning. I wrote down my notes here. I did the exact same questioning that Hunter did. I had my chip inhibitor removed. When is what I wrote. A long time ago. How long ago is what I wrote. And that's exactly what Crosshair, or what Hunter says. And then Crosshair says it doesn't matter. And this is what kind of was hurtful in the story to me, is when Crosshair says, this is who I am. And I wondered if he really believed that. I don't know. I don't know what to make of that, but I'm sorry, Dan, what was your question to me?
Well, just the notion that Crosshair didn't have his chip and all these things have happened.
Yeah, I didn't really know what to make of that other than shock. But you saying that about, maybe he's just been wanting to get everybody back together. It does make me think when they captured Hunter and Crosshair shows up in the prison cell and he says, well, I was hoping for all of you, but you'll do.
Yep.
It kind of gives context to that line now.
Mm-hmm.
And because my context to that was that he was going to do away with them. Like, I wanted all of you to dispose of you all at the same time, but one of you will do. Or as we saw, he uses them as bait. But now the context shifts a little bit because he wanted to give them a chance. And a chance for what? A chance to join the Empire, a chance to be a team again. I do wonder exactly what it is that Crosshair wanted, and maybe Crosshair doesn't know. Because it wasn't until I just said it about 10 seconds ago that which of those two does Crosshair really want? Does he want the feeling of camaraderie, the team back together, or does he want them to join the Empire to truly do work for the Empire?
Yeah, I don't know. Or maybe he thinks again that the Empire is actually trying to keep people safe. It's hard to imagine again that's the case, but I think a lot of it's going to be much more fleshed out. But then we get this great moment, Matthew, where Hunter and Crosshair are in this like Old West showdown. Now we've seen Hunter in a showdown before with Cad Bane. Obviously, that didn't go very well at the time, but it didn't really make me lose faith in Hunter's skills. And then we get kind of a shock at how that little conflict is resolved. Matthew, talk about that for us.
Yeah, and he could have easily put him down there, but he, again, and this goes to the credit of this show, instead of having to kill someone, they just stun him. They stun Crosshair just to put him out, and he says, grab him, let's go. And he could have just left him there. But this time he wasn't. He's being blamed this whole time for leaving Crosshair behind, and now he goes the other direction. We're bringing him along. And correct me if I'm wrong, was there in one of the earlier episodes where I think it was Tarkin at that point put Crosshair into a machine where they did something to him?
They amplified the effects of the inhibitor chip.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So, again, is this another point of the Empire lying to him? Saying, no, we took it out, and they really didn't.
Oh, wow.
That could be. But then I would have a hard time imagining him just shooting stormtroopers. I don't know.
But if it's truly the Empire, there's no loyalty to anybody. I mean, how many times did you see Vader attack one of their own?
That's true.
So it's that's again going back to you. I too had that same question. It was like, is he actually telling the truth? And Hunter's pressing it, and I'm right there with Hunter. I'm like, when? Give us details, and he can't answer. I don't know if he can't or he's refusing. It gets a little murky, and that's when the story shifts. And like you said, they stun him. There's a little showdown. They stun him, and let's get out of here. And you get these wonderful, like just eerie moments of the emptiness in the city.
Yeah.
It just kind of this, almost like Aliens. It's like you're running through this area that should be swarming. We've always seen it swarming with, people moving, clones and troopers and Caminos and everybody just going through it, and droids, and there's nothing.
One thing that's always stood out to me about Camino is, even though it's always dark outside on the planet's surface, in the interior, it's usually extremely well lit and very, very bright and very, very clean and sanitary, like a medical facility would be. Yeah. But in all of these sequences, it's very dark and dismal, very much reflecting not only what is going on with the characters internally, but the atmosphere outside. And then, you may fire when ready. The famous Tarkin line that we know is going to end in a very bad thing happening for people opposing the Empire. But all of them we see is destruction in the Star Destroyers continuing to pummel its Camino base. I mean, this is definitely the end of the Clone Wars, because all these facilities, everybody's gone from the planet. They've destroyed the base himself, all the landing platforms. Crosshair's knocked out over Wrecker's shoulder, and they're running off. It seems that they have nowhere to go, and then it just kind of, boom, it fades to black. And then there's dramatic music at the end, which we saw that sometimes in Rebels, where instead of the familiar theme that ends every episode, it's just dramatic, reflecting what just happened in the episode. Mm-hmm. But a lot of power, Tom, and emotion in the way this thing has ended.
Oh, it the last, 4 minutes of this episode were just heart-wrenching, shocking. It verified a lot of what I believed of the Empire. Something that ran through my head was, this just gives more. There was so little hope at the end of this, or in the midst of this, I suppose, that it just gives more. It gives more credibility to Episode 4, and I suppose even Rogue One, because we see how awful things are. A comment I have about those scenes right before, like as they're running to get to the shuttle, or to get to the Marauder, you see them running through the halls, and then they do a close up on Omega, and then you see her get like resolve, and she like runs a little harder, and then they cut to all these scenes. Here's what went through my mind, if I may. if you've ever moved from a home, and when you finally have the truck packed up and you've moved everything out of the house that you're moving out of, I don't know about anyone else's experience, but I've done it several times. I walk back through the home and I look at the empty rooms, and all that goes through my head is like, I see the empty rooms with my eyes, but my mind is someplace else. My mind is in the memories and like the good things or the bad things that happened in this room or in the kitchen or in the basement. And that's what I felt like. I don't know if that's what they were trying to do, but that's what I felt when we saw each of those plain scenes. And you're right, Matthew. Usually you see all of the troopers in their bubble containers as they're growing, and you see the mess hall that's usually loaded with things. But we didn't see those. We saw them in our minds. A little transcendentalism here. And so I thought that was genius, because it brought a lot of weight to the next thing that was going to happen, which, as we've noted, is absolute destruction. And the fire comes raining down, which took me to a moment, and I think it's one of the aftermath where they're bombarding Kashyyyk from space, and it brought reality to it in watching this. And one thing that I really appreciated here is when Clone Force 99 runs out onto the platform and they see the Star Destroyers or the ships they're doing this bombardment, and they look up and Echo's like back inside, and they turn, but Omega doesn't right away. And she stands there, and that's when I was like, oh my gosh, this is like me leaving my home.
Mm-hmm.
Because she looks and she just watches all of this. And I can only imagine that it's all stuff she has a personal relationship with in some fashion. She's watching it absolutely come down in just that split second where then AZ grabs her arm and pulls her back inside. And I was like, oh, so beautiful. So beautiful. We didn't even have to have that, but there it was. And just, she's the last one. She is the last to see her homeworld in this sort of state.
And not to mention the fact that earlier on she reflected, hey, this is where I was created. This is the hospital room where I was born, and all of my brothers were born too. And then she watches it get blown up.
Absolutely.
May I add some more to that? Tom, you're so right. I just moved just a little over a year ago, and I did that same exact thing where I would stand in each room, and in front of my eyes saw an empty room, but in my mind it was, I was in that last house for 17 years, and so 17 years of memories just coming and going, the ghosts of the past years and everything that has happened in there. And I will never see that room again that way, but in my mind it was still there, and just everything was playing through it. And I can only imagine, that was the first part that Omega was going through. And then the second part, thankfully, I've never been on this aspect, but I can only imagine it being someone who house, say, is on fire or something, a natural disaster, and your house is being destroyed. And it's that deer in the headlights. This is not really happening. And that's the look on her face, that this is not happening. And just seeing her home. Really, that was her home. I mean, as much as the Marauder and the Clone Force is, her new home, but that was her original home. And you see it being destroyed in front of her eyes. It's so in such a destructive and cold manner.
It's chilling. It's a very, like I said at the top of the show, it's probably the most mature episode of the entire season. Well, as we wrap this up and feverishly look forward to the finale of season 1 and what's going to happen here, how's the Bad Batch going to escape? We hope and presume that they will, because there's going to be a season 2, but we don't know what that's going to look like. Tom, any last minute or closing thoughts about this episode?
I do have one moment that we didn't talk about.
Okay.
And when this happened, my daughter says, that is so sweet. It's after he stuns Crosshair. Hunter stuns Crosshair. Omega runs right over to him and throws her arms around him. That just, that just that really hit me. And then because I felt that I have two daughters, I know what that feels like. And Hunter says, "Sorry, Omega, I promised we'd never come back." And she, in the mature fashion that she does, says, "It's okay. You'd do the same thing for me."
Mhm.
Oh my goodness. It's like the soul. So like she's part of the Clone Force 99 now. That is the soldier's code,
Yep.
you know? And just, I saw so much maturity, so much sweet in that it just like, it didn't make sense. It's like salty and sweet to get.
Yeah.
It's like a payday bar or something, but it was such a marvelous moment in this whole mess and right before the tragedy of it all. And so I just want to bring that up, and I feel so confident in my A+ rating of this that I don't know how they could possibly top it with episode or part 2 rather. And I can't wait till Friday.
Same. Matthew, any last minute thoughts on this one?
I want to make a Star Wars reference before, when you were talking about the darkness in the hallways, where it was light. You could also say it's a like the shadow of the Empire.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
Ooh,
but
very good.
Coming down over everything, and what comes with the Empire: destruction and useless waste. But again, thinking back to, and I apologize, I don't remember the episode name. You had mentioned how that the ending credit music was different. It wasn't the usual theme out song. It was just this eerie, very soft tone. And we heard that one other time, and it was in the episode where Omega gets captured.
Mm-hmm.
And then Hunter has to go and rescue her in the following episode. And we kind of have a reverse here, where she comes in and rescues Hunter, and then we get that same kind of that eerie music at the end. And this is just such a brilliant episode. This show just kept on building upon itself. And at first we were all kind of, okay, this seems like a good show. We don't know where it's going. And how quickly these now 14 episodes have gone by is I don't want it to end. I'm thankful that season 2 is coming up shortly. And I was like, okay, we don't know where it's going. And again, we don't know, does everyone even make it out of season 1 yet?
We don't know.
Yeah.
But it will certainly be exciting to find out.
Oh, I can't wait. And thankfully, we only have a few more hours after this.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
As we near the end of the show today, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to have a cup of coffee with me, and for helping to spread the word about our Star Wars family we've got here at Coffee with Kenobi. Be sure to tune in on Facebook Live at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/live or www.facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi and have a cup of coffee, tea, or any beverage of your choosing with me as we continue the conversation. To join us in the CWK Cafe, which is our Facebook group, and share your Star Wars thoughts, comments, reviews, and opinions in a family-friendly, spoiler-free place that is also drama-free, go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/community and be part of the conversation, talk about this week's show, or just talk about some Star Wars. We have a lot of fun, and you'll make some new friends, as well as catch up with longtime friends along the way. I also want to thank all of the new and longtime members of the CWK Alliance and let you know how much I appreciate your help and encouragement. If you want to join the CWK Alliance, go to www.cwkalliance.com and sign up today. Not only will you help out Coffee with Kenobi, but you also get access to CWK Pour-Over, the exclusive weekly podcast not heard anywhere else. It's a great way to support and help out the show, and 10% of your monthly contributions go directly to the St. Jude Children's Hospital to support the incredibly important work they are doing to help these brave children and their families. Plus, contributors at the CWK All-Star level can watch a video podcast of CWK Pour-Over hosted by me, Tom Gross, and Corey Clubb. Feel free to reach out anytime if you have any questions. in addition to being part of the community on Facebook. Please don't forget to visit our website at www.coffeewithkenobi.com for Star Wars news, announcements, reviews, videos, and so much more. If you have a question for me or just want to share your thoughts on the air, feel free to email me at danz@coffeewithkenobi.com, and I'll share them on the show. You can also connect with me on Twitter at Mr. Zaire, MRZEHR, or on Instagram at DanZairCWK. There are also a lot more ways to connect with me and Coffee with Kenobi on social media. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Give us a like on Facebook at facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi. Check us out on Pinterest or subscribe to our Coffee with Kenobi YouTube channel. On our YouTube channel, you can find Facebook Live video, different interviews throughout the years, highlights of video coverage throughout the Coffee with Kenobi history, and the audio podcast itself. You can order my book, The Star Wars Book, which I co-wrote with Lucasfilm's Pablo Hidalgo and Cole Horton, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Books A Million, Walmart, or anywhere books are sold. You can also find my writing on Coffee with Kenobi's website, as well as StarWars.com, where I am an official blogger there, and on IGN, where I contribute occasionally to articles about Star Wars, as well as other popular culture topics. If you are considering starting a podcast or a blog, let me know how I can help you get started and make your creative vision a reality. Be sure to check out danzmedia.com and we can get the process started. I am also available to come to your school, conference, business, or organization to talk about how to tap into your strengths and help you bring out your very best. I want to inspire you to be inspired so you can take that first step into a larger world. Thanks as always to our Coffee with Kenobi sponsors, especially MEI and Mouse Fan Travel, our travel partner and your one-stop shop for all things Walt Disney World, Disneyland, the Disney Cruise Lines, or anywhere on the planet you want to go on your vacation. Please go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel to book your magical vacation and help support Coffee with Kenobi in the process. If you like the show, please tweet out that you're listening, share it on Facebook, or invite your friends and family to tune in and share a cup of coffee with us. And if the Force is especially with you, please take a couple of minutes to rate and review the show on iTunes or Google Podcasts. Every review makes a huge difference and helps to spread the word, and I can't thank you enough for your help, for your support, and your friendship. I love so much being a part of this wonderful Star Wars community, and I can't thank you enough for all that you do for me and Coffee with Kenobi. We are near the end of the conversation, but it's been such an absolute pleasure to talk with both of you. Matthew, please let everybody know all about your podcast, where they can find it, listen to it, and where they can continue the conversation with you online.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm host of the Disney Marvels podcast. It's a show about anything and everything Disney, Disney, Marvels, Star Wars, Lucasfilm, Muppets. We have a bunch of wonderful guests on, plus our usual regular, sometimes just me meandering. So we talk about everything, and we are all over social. Our Facebook group, which is growing, is facebook.com/group/Disney Marvels Podcast. Instagram and TikTok, we're Disney Marvels Podcast. Yes, I'm actually on the TikTok, believe it or not.
Attaboy.
Don't ask me why. I'm there, though. And on Twitter, we're just Disney Marvels, where I think that's kind of where I'm the most active. And we're also even on YouTube now.
Excellent. Well, thanks again so much for coming on the show. You were certainly welcome anytime.
Oh, it's been my honor and my pleasure.
And Tom, where can people reach out to chat with you and find all your great stuff?
Oh, absolutely. Catch me on Twitter. That's probably where I spend most of my time, and that is at Draftline, DRAFTLINE. You can also find my writing on a blog on Blogger called Seeking Positivity in the Galaxy. My goodness, you'd think first time I'd ever done this. And gosh, you know what, Dan? By the time this airs, a project that I've been working on for a little while that you've assisted me with along the way.
Is this the big announcement?
This is the big announcement.
Okay.
I think.
Oh boy.
Okay. I by the time this airs, my first podcast foray, going somewhat solo, is going to be out. Our episode number 1 of a podcast called Teachers in the Dungeon will have come out. And you can find us also on the social medias. Twitter is at Dungeon Teachers. Instagram is Teachers in the Dungeon. Sorry, no TikTok for us. But we have a website, teachersinthedungeon.weebly.com. Check us out. Obviously, it is a Dungeons and Dragons podcast. We break down and analyze the games that we play, and we have some random encounter discussions as well. That's me, and our friend Dan Ream is co-hosting with me on that podcast. So I'd love for people to check it out. It's episode 1 this week. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
I love it. Congratulations, my friend. I can't wait to see all the fun stuff you and Dan are going to do with that show.
I'm going to add that to my list. And nothing like a bunch of teachers gathering around and nerding out about Dungeons and Dragons or Star Wars.
That's right. We are in good company there.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.